The
Yeah,
cola?
they probably use sugar instead now.
What
No,
does,
that's what I was from. All of them were like that, yeah.
what does the cola stands for?
Well, I get an idea what
Don't
the
know.
Coke stands for.
Don't know what the...
Coca leaves, stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
The cola.
All right, let's get started. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, we thank you that we can be here this evening. We ask, dear God, that you guide us as we look into your word. Illuminate our minds, Father. Guide our conversation, that everything will be for your glory. In Jesus' name. Amen. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. We're moving along. We're going to read verses 1 through 5. Everybody there? Angelita, you want to read 1 through 5?
Yeah. So when we could stand it no longer, we thought it best to be left by ourselves in Athens. We sent Timothy, who is our brother and co-worker in God's service, in spreading the gospel of Christ, to strengthen and encourage you in your faith, so that no one would be unsettled by these trials. You know quite well that we are destined for them. In fact, when we were with you, we kept telling you that we would be persecuted. And it turned out that way, as you well know. For this reason, when I could stand it no longer, I sent to find out about your faith. I was afraid that in some way the tempter had tempted you, and that our labor might have been in vain.
Amen. Any initial questions on that?
So this is Paul writing to Timothy?
No, writing to Thessalonians,
Oh,
explaining why he had sent Timothy to them.
right.
Because of his deep... Obviously, in the situation, Paul and Silas might have been very visible people, and so easy to recognize, so they couldn't sneak back into Thessalonica. But obviously Timothy was not as well known, because Timothy was able to go back into Thessalonica and then come back with the news. So something about him, maybe because he wasn't the prominent one, maybe he was able to sneak back in and get a report. But Paul himself could not go because they would know that's Paul. And obviously Silas, for some reason, maybe was well known as well. So they sent
And
Timothy.
they were in trouble in there?
Yeah, remember in Thessalonica they had to run out because the Jews were making things difficult for them. And they had to run out, and they weren't able to spend as much time as they wanted to train Thessalonians in the faith. And we're going to get into more of that in chapter 4 and 5, where he talks about those things that he wished he could have dealt with when he was with them, but he couldn't because he didn't have the luxury of time, and now he's going to have to deal with that deficiency in their knowledge. So here, of course, he explains why he decided to send Timothy, for the sake of their faith, as well as for Paul's sake. He wanted to make sure the tempter, that Satan, had not tempted the Thessalonian believers to give up in their faith. And certainly then, if they give up, then all the work that Paul's put into this is out the window. You know, and it's just not simply that, they abandoned the faith. Oh, yeah, but now Paul, all that work that he did, all the suffering he endured, all that they went through is for nothing.
Satan must have been like first hand there, right?
In this, Paul is not the kind of guy who finds devils everywhere. He's not the kind of guy who's always, the devil's after me. Oh, you never read that in his writings. Very rarely does he mention it. So when he mentions it, there's a direct involvement, a direct satanic involvement in this. And he sees it clearly spiritually that, yes, this is not like, just a coincidence. So this is an active assault from the enemy. We're the opposite. We tend to we're almost like, sometimes we're like, I think almost like on the haughty side, because we think like, the devil's out to get me. Okay, maybe a minor demon.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the petty officers, but I never think in my Christianity I was so prominent, so important, that the devil himself made me like, ooh, I got to get this guy.
After like the head.
Yeah, maybe like a Billy Graham or something, Yes, come on, somebody like high up, somebody that you really like. I would think Billy Graham. I think, yeah, someone's going to attract.
Presidents.
It's going to get, yeah, it's going to, yeah, or somebody like that, someone like president, or someone important that, you know, Satan has something. Otherwise, I can see like I used to joke about it, because sometimes I would really, I would catch on to what the enemy was trying to do in my life, and I was thinking, man, I must have like a retarded demon who's just so blatantly obvious in his assaults that I'm like, oh, come on, dude, that's so obvious you're tempting me. This is pathetic, you know. So maybe I'll find out when I get to heaven. It's like, yeah, you had a petty.
Yeah.
You know. But no, Paul knows in this case it was more than that. It was somebody. It was definitely the enemy, Satan himself, orchestrating against Paul and his mission, and that makes sense. Paul was one of the most prominent Christians in the early century of the church. I mean, who's doing more work than Paul? I mean, literally, he evangelizes most of the pagan world at that time.
He would be our liaison, so to speak, right?
I mean,
Being that with Gentiles, Paul would.
yeah, he would be preaching to us. That's right.
Liaison.
That's right.
Like he was our apostle.
He was reaching to a he called himself the apostle to the Gentiles. This is what he was. So I mean, he's reaching out to so many people persistently. He's just nonstop.
It's like
He's
if
a
somebody
workhorse.
said, well, if you asked them their favor and they said Peter, somebody else said that, but I guess if it wasn't for Paul, he was the one that cared enough about us, right?
Well, it wasn't that he cared about us. I mean, I'm sure he did, but he had a calling. I mean, God had called Peter to minister to the Jewish communities. So Peter was also traveling as a missionary, but he was dealing mostly with Jewish. But he was not like Paul. Paul, highly educated, and obviously writing all these letters. So much so that there are letters of Paul that we don't have.
Oh,
Yeah, like if you read Corinthians, you'll see that there's like 2 Corinthian letters missing. You know, like he talks about this a severe letter that he wrote, blah blah blah. There's like 2 letters missing, and people believe that first of all, severe letter. Probably the Corinthians didn't want that letter to survive because it was a harsh rebuke of them, and also it was specifically just for them. It wasn't like a general where it could be applied, because all the other letters of Paul, churches were making copies for themselves to read them. So Paul, actually by the end of the 1st century, Paul was so prominent by the end of the 1st century that somebody had already collected all his letters together. Not just, Galatia has some disciple already, probably a little fanatic like myself, was already very Pauline and said, oh wow, let's collect all his letters and put them together. So, but he was prominent that way, and he knew that his letters were influential. So,
was he really Paul?
you know, there's a description of him.
It really was?
Paul.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
boy.
there's only one physical description of him in a book called The Acts of Paul, which is not by Paul, and it's not early, but there's a description there that says, oh yeah, he was bald, bow-legged. It describes him as not very appealing at all, you know. So, but yeah, that's the only physical description we have of him. Any questions? Okay, verses 1 through 3. He says that we thought it best to leave Athens. We sent Timothy. Where's that? To strengthen and encourage you in your faith. Now here, your faith is not a reference to their Christianity, to trusting in Jesus. It's encouragement. Again, the word faith is like, you know, I see people make a lot of mistakes. This mistake, very common on Facebook, for other preachers. I hear them say the word faith is pistis, and it's very general, so it can mean a number of things. And here, it's not talking about their faith as Christians, but their faithfulness to Christ. He sends Timothy to strengthen them so that they will remain faithful to Jesus Christ, faithful to the gospel. Not because, they're about to lose their faith. No, it's not about them accepting Christ. They are Christians. It's the possibility that they'll falter in their faithfulness to the Lord. So that's what he wants to strengthen. But again, it's the same Greek word, so it's very difficult to know. Unless you have to get to know Paul better, know the scriptures better. to know, oh yeah, here it has to be a reference to this. It's like recently I was preaching and I said about Romans chapter 12, where it talks about the different gifts. He says, each gift given to us according to the measure of our faith. It has nothing to do with salvation. It has to be that God gives you the faith that you need to activate your gift and use it for the Lord. And here it is again. Look at that verse. He says, so no one will be unsettled by these trials, for you know quite well that we are destined for them. That's deep.
Yeah.
Destined, the word literally meant to lie or to recline, and it came to be used to mean to be there for this cause, to be destined. Paul says right here, we were destined for trials and suffering. As Christians, it's unavoidable. You know, he says in one of the pastoral epistles, he says, if you're going to be faithful to Christ, you're going to suffer persecution. I mean, how can you be faithful to Jesus and think that you're going to go through this world without a scratch? Anybody who wants to be, I know people that have been faithful to Christ in their job, and they, you know, I won't lie, I won't do this, and they've been fired because of that. I knew a lady that worked at a doctor's office. The doctor wanted her to fabricate certain things, and she was like, no, I'm a Christian, and she got fired. You know, he came up with some excuse to fire her, but that's persecution.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Christians are constantly, if you're going to live for Christ, you have to know this is what we're destined for. And as I said, Paul hardly ever mentions, verse 4 and 5, Paul hardly ever blames the devil for anything. He normally speaks of us being guilty for our own sins and our own actions and our own things. But he's aware that the enemy does get involved and does seek to undermine the work of God. One clear example besides this one is in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. If you want to turn to that, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Second Corinthians 4. Yeah, no. Yeah, here. It's Romans and then Corinthians.
Oh, that's good.
Now 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 4, 3 and 4. Rose, wait.
No, you can go.
Rose, would you read that for us?
And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers, so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is in the image of God.
Amen. Again, see here Satan, called the God of this age, actively working to close people off from the gospel, to blind them so that they won't see the obvious glory. So, you know, sometimes we say, well, why can't they see it? Why? It's just as clear as day. Look at it. If anybody looked at this, because he's actively working to blind people to the truth of the gospel. He doesn't want people to know about Jesus. He doesn't want people to hear the gospel. He doesn't want them to comprehend the gospel. And I mean, because when you think about it, like, especially in America, this is not like Paul in the first century. He's already talking about it in the first century. But today, when I think about it, every single year there's Easter. Every single year there's Christmas. And it's not like, oh my goodness, we never see the story, but you see the story being told, even on television. There'll be a movie where they mention Christ. Or sometimes I'll even hear a Christian song talking about Christ, you know, coming to Bethlehem to die, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and it's like, how did they miss that? How did they miss that? You know? And again, C.S. Lewis has a good take on that. And in the Screwtape Letters, again, one head demon telling a minor demon how to keep this guy away from the gospel. And he says, you know, when you see him going into any kind of deep thought, or he starts seriously thinking about it, remind him that it's time for lunch, or you know, distract him with a bus or a beautiful girl. You know, and you know, it's funny, but it's true. It just distract him. You know, when you see him or something like looking, you're like, wow. Yeah, I am kind of getting hungry. It is like I can always look at this later. And how many people say, "Oh, I can look at this later. I'll come back to it," and they never come back to it. That curiosity was there for that moment, for that, ooh, and then you know, they gave it up. And this is what Paul's talking about.
Does
Yeah.
the devil, excuse me, does the devil, if he can, get to us through our families?
Through our families? Oh yeah, of course. Because, I
In
mean,
all our ways.
yeah, because that's our prime, that's the thing that hits us the most. I mean, what can hurt you the most than your own family members making it difficult? When I became a Christian, my mother, oh my goodness, she literally called the pastor of the church and told him, throw him out. She was so antagonistic. It took like the longest time for her to relent and to just stop. I mean, I was even in Bible college, and she was still trying to get me to leave this whole thing and not get involved in Christianity any further. She hated it because she thought he's just becoming a Looney Tune. And she had no comprehension of what the faith was. The only time my mother was ever impressed, ever really truly impressed, was one time she walked in on me, and I had my Greek New Testament. And she looked down at it, she knew it was not Spanish or English or anything she had ever seen. And she said, "What is that?" And I said, "Greek." And she was like, "Oh." And she left. That was the only time I think she was ever truly impressed that this was not like some Looney Tune cult or something. But she was trying everything possible to get me out of Christianity. And yeah, of course, how is the enemy going to attack? He's going to attack at our weakest points. The people that we love the most, the things that, the heartstrings. So yeah, I do believe so. I do believe the enemy's using also, but he also uses your boss. He also uses
Anything he can.
yeah, of course. Anything I mean, today I think it's much easier because I think that today, I mean, think about it. We live in such a distracted age. We have like 1,000 channels, and yet people are bored. They can't find anything on TV. We have all this. Not only do you have radio, but you have all those stations that you can actually just connect to and listen to at any time you want to. People don't even like silence. Like I've noticed that even my daughter sometimes I'm agitated because all of a sudden I'm not listening to anything, and I put on like classical music. It's almost like music without words. What is that? That's insanity, It's like you want to hear something, and it just it's like people need to be constantly doing something. I mean, think about it. Even myself, I catch myself doing this when I'm looking at a TV. While I'm looking at a show, all of a sudden I start scrolling to see.
Are you a surfer? Channel surfer?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I don't have to surf. There's a button where I can actually put the screen over here.
Oh, okay.
And I can see the other channels.
Okay.
And I'm like, also I want to see if something else is on or whatever, while I still have this thing on, instead of looking at it. So I mean, this is the world we live in, constantly distracted, and so I think it's easier for the enemy to take us away from the gospel, and certainly just make it easier for us not to even, if you're not being faithful to the Lord, if you're not serving Him wholeheartedly, I don't see how the enemy has to even waste his time with you. No, seriously. If I have a Christian who calls himself a Christian, and then I go to church, they're not reading their Bible, they're certainly not praying, what am I worried about them for? If I saw a Christian, if I was demonic, and I see a Christian that's not praying, you're not reading the Bible, and you're certainly not witnessing for Jesus,
You can go where it's most good.
you're fine by yourself. Why would I bother you?
Right.
If I bothered you, I might wake you up. I don't want to wake you up. You're in a nice little slumber there. So, I think when the enemy's attacking us, because we are trying to be faithful, we're trying to serve the Lord, witnessing for Christ, whatever. So it's like, so, any other question?
And then I see something else on the other side of things. How God sent you situations and friends that are a blessing. That
Amen.
it's like angels or whatever. Like I can think of a couple, somebody that God has sent to me. I say, how do you do that? And how original He is. God is so original. Yeah, I always go, it has to be God, because, and it's so wonderful how he sends you somebody that you need, that is going to be a blessing, is going to be what you really need.
See, and that's important because I didn't mention also about, obviously you're bringing up a good point, is the whole important, that's why I said go to church, but the whole idea of fellowship. Because think about it, when you're going through a hard time, if all you have is pagan friends, they're not going to lift you up, and they're not going to encourage you, and they're not going to bless you. But when you have Christian friends, they're constantly exhorting you, helping you. When someone says to you, "Oh, I'm praying for you," or they send you a verse, or they encourage you with the Word of God, they say something. It's like a blessing. It's like you're right. It's like they're uplifting you.
I even feel that if I have a good news or something, I have to pass it on to my Christian friends. Like with this, I feel like I should tell everybody, and I want to tell everybody.
Right.
Because for all the pain, no pain, but things that I've had, now I have it. And you go tell it that somebody's not it's not a Christian. Yeah, but it's not the same thing that if you can tell a Christian.
Amen.
Because you identify and they identify with you.
That's right. That's right. It's a whole different conversation because, as soon as I'm talking to a non-Christian anywhere, everything becomes about, oh, just hang in there, and they talk about luck and things will work out. And what do you mean things will work out? You're not a Christian. How do you believe this stuff? If it's luck, that means that it might not work out. But yet, what are they going to tell you? They have nothing to tell you. That's why I always joke and say, notice that when there's a tragedy, when something horrible happens, they never go asking atheists, what do you think? They always go to a priest, a minister, a rabbi. They go to religious people. They never go to it. I would love to see like a tragedy, 20 kids got killed. Let's ask an atheist, what do you have to say to this situation? Nothing. You have nothing to say. You have no hope, no morality, no nothing. It's hopeless, But that's why to have that core of Christians that lifts you up, that strengthens you, that will encourage you. Otherwise you're really it's like, what was it? A lone ranger is a dead ranger. it's like I can't remember what preacher used to say that. But it was like you can't be a lone ranger. He says even the lone ranger had Tonto. Don't fool yourself. We all need people around us that will strengthen us and help us. We cannot do it on our own.
And the hopes that they have are so ridiculous. I go to this place for coffee, and they play lottery right and left. They spend a fortune for the strikes. First I says, how can they be so stupid? I think to myself, how can they be so stupid that they're like, and the bigger the price, the more they play. You idiot! The bigger the price, the more people don't play, so the less chances they have to. And they have it like a job. Some of them have a job in checking numbers and playing numbers.
That's their addiction.
They did a thing on the winners. Some of them can't stay out of jail.
Oh no, yeah.
What?
They did a thing, I guess, a study on the winners. Some of them can't stay out of jail.
Oh, no,
they got money now.
There was a whole show they did for a while. They're not doing. I guess they don't do it anymore because it kind of maybe it backfired. But they followed people that had won the lottery. So many of them within a few years squandered everything. They were in debt. They were in trouble. My favorite one. I hate to say favorite one, but it was so incredible. The guy was rich and he was so paranoid that he actually lived in his house with cameras, fearing people were going to rob him and stuff like that. Like, oh my goodness, you all this wealth, and now all you are is one little sad, paranoid person hiding with a bunch of cameras, thinking that someone's coming after you.
Well,
you're not even living.
I would worry about all the people that they're not your friends, but all of a sudden you win, and they're going to try and get money out of you.
A lot of friends.
Family member once,
Oh, not only that, there was a movie made about.
They shouldn't.
They made a movie with Nicolas Cage that he had won the lotto, and he had told the waitress, because he didn't have a tip. He was a cop. He was actually in New York. And he told the waitress, but I'll give you half of the ticket. And his wife got so angry because he actually ended up winning, and she was, you can't give her half of it. I promised. I was like, no, you can't do that. And she fought against him and everything. And she got divorced, but she was swindled of the money she had because she basically took all the money. She ended up with all the money because she divorced and everything. And she had a guy who said, talk about investments. He's a swindler. He's a scam artist. He took the money from her. A fantastic story.
I want to watch a good movie, and it's true. It's about the first New York City lottery winner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. It's an Italian neighborhood. And it's the movie starts off, I don't want to win the lottery. I don't want to win the lottery. He's mad. He won. He starts throwing snowballs at the church. The priest comes out yelling at him. Now he's throwing snowballs at the priest. Then when they arrest him, the officer says, "Why? What made you so mad?" Because I won the lottery. So what do you want, Mama Luke? and the real winner played his brother.
Mm.
And it's a funny movie because it's kind of traditional Italian family fighting with each other in real time. It's called 50 Years.
Now here we see, of course, Paul showing a sign of anxiety, concern about these young believers. Now, I want to examine this idea because sometimes we see what sounds like two contradictory ideas in the Bible. Remember, Jesus said, "Do not be anxious about anything." And even Paul says in Philippians 4:6, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God." But we have to divide the fact that his anxiety was not about like food or clothing. It wasn't a lack of trust in God. His concern was a legitimate concern for them as believers, that they will be able to remain faithful in the things of God. I mean, when you say, that I have a certain concern of almost an anxiety for the salvation of a loved one, that's not a bad thing. That's not like I'm not trusting God. It's not like say, oh, I don't trust God for my daily bread. I don't trust God for my food. I don't trust God for that. No, that's not what it's at all. So we have to divide those things. Paul is not anxious in the sense of like, oh, I don't trust God. No, it's that I'm concerned about your spirituality. I'm concerned about you abandoning faith. Which brings us to the major issue. If Paul's concerned about them falling away, it means that they can fall away. Sjogren in his commentary says, Paul and the team were deeply fearful. Fear results from what might really happen, not from what cannot happen, and is only hypothetically possible. Their anxiety is not due to some mere abstract conjecture. If Paul believed that they could not fall away at all, then he has no reason to be concerned. The fact that he's concerned is because they can fall away. And if you look at when Jesus talked about the seeds that were growing, there is a seed that he mentions that begins to grow, but then the cares and anxieties of this world choke them. So you see people who start out in the faith, it looks like, oh my goodness, they're off to a great start, they're moving, and all of a sudden, bang, they get wrapped up in the world again. They get caught up.
The same as you can lose your salvation?
Well, that's the question right there. Can you lose salvation? If they were already saved, or was it that they were starting to get into things of Christ and he doesn't want to fall away? That's where the debate comes in. But either way, we should take the admonition seriously. And again, even Jesus talked about the seed. Not that it might grow. It was growing. There was a seed that was growing, and then it was choked up. It didn't come to full width.
That's
and
like
again,
the parable, right?
Yeah, that's the parable. Luke 8, where Jesus talks about the four types of seeds.
Right.
Two of them are obviously not believers at all. One, seed falls, the animals come and get it. The other one is like gets grounded on. Nothing happens to those. But then the third one begins to grow. But then it gets choked up. And then the fourth one grows and keeps on growing and multiplies.
Could the third one still be a Christian then?
That was the question. To me, yes. I believe a person can begin the things of the Lord and can abandon the faith. Because they get wrapped up in the world again.
So he could still be a Christian then?
No, I believe that they can fall away.
Oh, no, I'm saying
They can
on the
abandon.
third one, if you're worried about if you're
no.
worried about the country going down, does that mean you're not a Christian?
Well, no. They get choked up because of the cares. They get consumed back in the world. They abandon Christ. Their concern is no longer walking in the Lord or being faithful. They literally leave Christ. They go back into the world.
So it's not like they're worried about their economy. Or
No.
something.
Well, no. If you're worried about those things, you're a Christian, but you have an anxiety issue which you need to pray about and work on, because ultimately it's a lack of trust in God. You know, most people are thinking, well, when you're worried about the economy, you're trusting more in the U.S. economy than you are in God. You know, and instead of saying like Paul, whether we have or don't have, we're content, and we know who's Lord and we know who's sovereign. Whether Trump is president or somebody else, and God is God. God is going to take care of us. You know, will God take care of me? Yes, He'll take care of you. God will provide for you. Doesn't mean, of course, that we get to be stupid and not invest properly or be smart, but it means that we should not be overly concerned. What do you think? And some Christians do get overly concerned.
Well,
they're checking the stock market like it's the Bible. Oh no, it dropped 2 points. Oh my goodness, there goes. I just lost $1,000. Oh, there goes my universe.
Well, but being a government worker on a government pension, I got concerns. They already stopped the cost of living increase. Now they're trying to cut into the pension. You cut it too much, I lose my home. No.
That's right. That's a concern. But when it becomes an anxiety, where you're fearful and you don't trust the Lord to take care of you, then it's a problem. It's not like it's a concern. A concern is normal. All of us think about, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to do that? That's normal. But when we begin to fret over it, like it's the end of the world, now we have a problem. And then even in Jesus, don't be anxious about what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear. People really can get pretty warped in our society, and they really do become anxious about things. Again, that might be something you struggle with. I've known Christians, devout believers, and they struggle their whole life with anxiety. You know, they get something happens, they get very, very nervous, and that's a trust issue. Because think about what it's like saying, well, God, I really don't believe you will take care of me.
But I mean,
if this falls apart, there's no way you're going to take care of me.
Well, if they say they cut my pension in half, I can no longer afford the type of house I can apartment.
That's right. You can't.
I don't want to go to the apartment where you can hear every little knocking, people walking above.
That's right.
I'd end up insane.
But that's still saying. But if it says, okay, but where do you put your trust? Do you trust that God will still provide for you, still take care of you?
Well, He could take care of me, but that doesn't mean I won't end up in the apartments I grew up in, where you end up getting fights with the neighbors because they're too noisy. You know what I mean? When you got thick plastic walls, I don't have that. Now, if I lose my home, I'm not saying no Christian ever starved, but I don't want to go back to where I came from.
Yeah. Well, this doesn't mean you have to go back to where you came from.
Well, how else will I afford to?
Well, I don't know.
Unless somebody died and left me a lot of money.
There you go. Again, it's a question of trust. But again, it's whether. But for Paul, it's like Paul would say to you, well, whether I'm living in this condo or whether I'm living back in that apartment,
He would care.
I'm content.
Yeah.
Because again, who am I trusting? Who am I? I mean, look, you could end up, let's say, tomorrow, it could be the opposite. You could end up getting a much bigger home, but then a truck hits you.
Yeah.
Or you get cancer.
But I mean,
now who cares about the truck? Who cares about the? Let's say you have your condo, right? And you get cancer. Who cares about your condo now?
I don't know. But you can't be content if your nerves will be shot. There's a difference there. Now you're reacting out of your nerves are shot. You can't be content once your nerves are shot.
Again, you're presuming that you're going to end up in a situation.
Well, I'm hoping.
See, and the imagination creates an anxiety about something that doesn't exist. Think about it. When I'm worried about my next meal, I'm creating anxiety that doesn't really exist. Most people live with anxieties that don't actually exist. I worry, oh, I got this pain. Oh my God, I wonder if it's cancer. It's like we spend like 6 months worrying if it's cancer, we find out it was ulcer or something, or something, it's like, or something minor. But we always tend to exaggerate things and just trust the Lord, trust that God would. When I was lying in bed and I had that pain, I was like just turning as much. I kept listening to the Bible. I kept praying. I kept saying, but were there times when it was tough? Yeah, I was agonizing pain. I was like, God, please, are you listening to me? Please get this pain away. But I had to. But even when I was going like that, I was still talking to him, and I had to trust him. I mean, he saved me. It's like, I would see God as the God who took me out of the place where I was at. So why can I not trust him where I am now?
Yeah.
And again, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because all of us are going to face those situations. I don't care, Michael, how things may stay for you right now. Maybe they'll stay very steady. The fact is that doesn't preclude that you might end up having a brain tumor, cancer. You'll still keep your house. So what? When I was in pain, I was like, when I was in pain, what did it really matter to me that I had my house and I had a bed? I was in pain. I could be in a mansion, I was still in pain. It always reminds me of Rockefeller, Nelson Rockefeller. The man was a billionaire, but he had an illness in his stomach. He had to eat like a poor man. He couldn't eat, without getting sick. He had to eat like, oatmeal and stuff like that to keep his stomach sedated. So the wealthy man cannot enjoy a good meal. So, I mean, come on. But again, it's a question of trusting God. You have to trust the Lord that no matter what my circumstances, God will provide for me. God will take care of me. God will, it's not my pension will take care of me when I have gray hairs. It's the Lord. It's almost like, think about it. We pray, give us this day our daily bread. But yet I know I can go down to the supermarket and buy the bread. Why do we pray? Because we know that we're ultimately relying upon God. That no matter what we have in the bank account, no matter what is, God is our ultimate provider. And so we're relying upon Him and dealing with Him. Hey, are your walls are the walls where you live thin?
Well, interesting enough, yesterday, all of a sudden, I don't know what the person next door did.
I guess so. Sorry, I was going to try to tell you. Maybe in a retired place.
I think in a senior home that they would be less noisy than the average 25-year-old.
Although I'll encourage you this way. If worse comes to worse, you sell in Jersey, you go down south.
We're already thinking about it.
When I was let me stop this because now we're talking